Hi friends, before I say anything else, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a breath, a real one. Not the shallow kind you've been taking all week while you rush from one thing to the next, while you scroll, while you worry, while you pretend everything is fine. I mean a real breath through your nose. Hold it and let it go. Because what I'm about to say to you, I don't want it to hit the surface. I want it to go deep. I want it to reach the part of you that you've been keeping quiet. The part of you that used to dream so loudly you couldn't sleep at night. The part of you that believed, really believed, that you were meant for something extraordinary. I want to talk to that version of you today because somewhere along the way, something happened. Life happened. Life happened. Disappointment happened. People happened. And slowly, quietly, without you even noticing, you started shrinking. You started playing small. You started waking up in the morning, and instead of saying today is another chance, you started saying, here we go again. And I'm here today because I refuse to let that be your story. I refuse to let you settle. I refuse to let you sleepwalk through the one life you have been given on this earth. So before we go any further, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. Not the polished answer, not the answer you give people at dinner parties. The real answer. The honest, raw, 3 in the morning answer. When was the last time you spoke to yourself with kindness? When was the last time you woke up in the morning, looked at yourself in the mirror, and said something that lifted you up instead of tore you down? When was the last time the first voice you heard in the morning, that voice inside your head? When was the last time that voice was on your side? Because here's what most people don't talk about. Here's the thing that nobody puts on a motivational poster. The most important conversation you will ever have in your life is not with your boss. It's not with your boss. It's not with your children or your parents or your mentor. The most important conversation you will ever have in your life is the one you have with yourself every single morning, before you check your phone, before you speak to anyone else, before the world gets a chance to define your day. That conversation sets everything. It sets your posture. It sets your energy. It sets what you believe is possible. It sets whether you show up as a warrior or a victim, whether you move through your day with purpose or drift through it with fear. And most of us are having the wrong conversation. I want to tell you about a man I know. I'm going to call him David. David grew up in a small town. His father worked in a factory. His mother cleaned houses. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And for a long time, that felt like enough. David was the kind of kid who dreamed out loud. He'd sit at the dinner table and talk about how one day he was going to build something. He didn't know exactly what. Maybe a company, maybe a community, maybe just a life that felt bigger than the town he was born in. His mother would smile. His mother would smile. His father would put down his fork and say, "Son, people like us don't get to dream like that." Now his father wasn't a cruel man. He was a tired man. He was a man who had been told the same thing so many times that he believed it. And so he passed it on. The way we all pass on the things we believe, not with cruelty, but with certainty. David carried those words with him for years. People like us don't get to dream like that. And every morning, without realizing it, that was the first thing his brain played. Like an old tape, worn down from so much use. People like us. And so he stopped dreaming out loud. He took a job he didn't love. He married a woman he cared about but never fully opened up to. He had kids he adored but never showed them the real him, the dreamer, the builder. Because he'd buried that man so deep he wasn't sure he existed anymore. And then one morning, David's youngest daughter, she was maybe 7 years old. She climbed into bed with him before he woke up. And she put her little hand on his face and she said, "Daddy, do you know you're my hero?" And something broke open in David's chest. Not because it was a compliment, but because in that moment he realized he was living a life that didn't match the word hero. He was going through the motions. He was surviving, not living. He was present in body but absent in spirit. And his daughter, his 7-year-old daughter, had seen something in him that he had stopped seeing in himself a long, long time ago. He told me he went into the bathroom and cried, not a few tears. Ha ha! He said he sobbed like a child. And when he looked up at himself in the mirror, through red eyes and a wet face, he said something out loud that he had never said before in his life. He said, "I am not done." 3 words, "I am not done." 3 words, I am not done. And those three words changed everything, not overnight. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it was easy. It wasn't. He had to unlearn decades of a story he'd been told about himself. He had to have uncomfortable conversations. He had to try things and fail. He had to get up off the floor more times than he could count. But every morning, every single morning, he started doing something different. He started talking to himself differently. Before his feet hit the floor, before the world rushed in, he would say things to himself on purpose, with intention, things that were true, even when they didn't feel true yet. And that, friends, is what I want to talk to you about today. Because what David discovered, what every person who has ever made a genuine transformation in their life has discovered, is that the mind is not a passive thing. It is not a neutral observer waiting for life to happen. The mind is a creator. It is constantly building a reality out of the raw material you feed it. And the most powerful raw material you feed it is what you say to yourself first thing in the morning. Think about it this way. You know, when you plant a seed, the first hours after you plant it are some of the most critical. The soil needs to be right. The water needs to be right. The conditions need to support that seed taking root. If those first conditions are wrong, it doesn't matter how much sunlight comes later. You've already compromised the root. Your morning is your soil. What you say to yourself in those first moments of the day is what you plant. And what you plant will grow. The question is, what are you planting? Most people wake up and immediately plant fear. They plant scarcity. They plant doubt. They reach for their phone and within 60 seconds, they are comparing themselves to someone else's highlight reel, swimming in other people's opinions, drowning in bad news, anxiety already humming at full volume before they've had a single sip of water. And then they wonder why the day feels hard. They wonder why they can't sustain motivation. They wonder why, despite everything they know they should be doing, they still can't seem to push themselves to do it. They blame discipline. They blame willpower. They blame their circumstances. But the truth is simpler and harder than all of that. The truth is, they're talking themselves out of their own life before the day even begins. So let me ask you this. Let me ask you what I asked David when we first started talking. If you had a best friend, someone you loved deeply, someone whose life you genuinely cared about, and every single morning you called that friend and said to them what you say to yourself, would that friend still be your friend? Would you call your best friend and say, "Good morning, you're probably going to fail today. You're not smart enough. You're not disciplined enough. Look at how far behind you are. Look at how much better everyone else is doing. You're too old. You wasted too much time. Who do you think you are wanting more?" Would you say that to someone you love? Of course not. You would never. You would be horrified at the thought. And yet, that is what millions of people say to themselves before they even get out of bed in the morning. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Just sit with it. Because the cruelty we inflict on ourselves, quietly, privately, in the space between waking and living, is something that most people carry alone for their entire lives. Nobody talks about it. Nobody admits it. It's the secret war being fought in the most intimate space in the universe, your own mind. And today, I want to declare that war ends here, not because you're weak and you need someone to rescue you. Hear me clearly. I am not saying that. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are not broken. You are not beyond repair. Quite the opposite. What I'm saying is that you are powerful beyond your current understanding. And the fact that you have survived everything you have survived, every hard day, every failed attempt, every moment of doubt, every time life hit you harder than you thought you could take, the fact that you are here right now, breathing, present, still in the game, that is not weakness. That is extraordinary strength, but strength needs direction. Strength without direction is just noise. And the direction of your life starts with the direction of your thoughts. And the direction of your thoughts starts with what you say to yourself every morning. I want to tell you about a woman named Maria. Maria grew up in a country where women were told their whole lives that their value was tied to the men around them. She married young because that's what you did. She had children young because that's what you did. She smiled and she served, and she stayed small because that's what you did. And for years she believed that this was enough, that this was her story, that the chapter called Maria's Dreams had simply not been written for her. Then her husband left, and the world she had built around someone else's definition of her life came apart overnight. And she was 42 years old with 3 children, no recent work experience, and a voice inside her head so loud and so cruel, it was almost unbearable. Every morning she would wake up, and the voice would come. You're too old. You have nothing to offer. Nobody will hire you. You made the wrong choices. This is what you get. She told me she would lie in bed and wait for the voice to finish, like it was a storm she had to wait out. Like she was a hostage in her own mind. And then one day, she told me she doesn't know exactly what shifted. She decided she wasn't going to wait anymore. She got up before the voice could start. She went to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror. And she said out loud with her own voice, not a confident voice, not a polished voice, a shaking, uncertain, terrified voice. She said, I am still here and I am not finished. And then she went and made coffee and sent her first job application in 20 years. It was rejected. She sent another one, rejected. She sent 47 applications over the next 3 months. She got 5 interviews. She bombed 3 of them. She got 2 offers. She took 1. It wasn't a glamorous job. It wasn't the life she had imagined. But it was hers. It was built with her own hands. And every morning she got up, she looked in that mirror, and she said something to herself that moved her forward. Even when she was exhausted, even when she was scared, even when the old voice tried to creep back in, she told me, and this is the part I want you to hear. She told me that the job, the money, the independence, those were all important. But the real transformation wasn't external. The real transformation was that she fell in love with herself. Hattie fell in love with herself. Not in a selfish way, not in an arrogant way, in the deepest, most profound way. She stopped being at war with her own existence. She started each day as her own ally instead of her own enemy. And she said to me, I spent 42 years waiting for someone else to tell me I was worth something. I was worth something. And when he left and nobody was there to say it, I realized I was always the one who was supposed to say it. I just never knew. She was always the one who was supposed to say it. Let me say that again, because I need you to hear this all the way down. You are the one who is supposed to say it. Not your mother, not your partner, not your boss, not the comment section, not the number of likes on a post, not the grade on a report card, not the size on a clothing label, not the balance in a bank account. You are the one who decides what story gets told about you. You are the one who sets the tone. You are the origin point of everything that comes next. And it always starts, with the words you choose first thing in the morning. Now I know what some of you are thinking. I can feel it. You're thinking, this sounds nice. This sounds like something you'd find on a coffee mug. But you don't know my life. You don't know what I'm dealing with. You don't know the debt, the diagnosis, the divorce, the dead-end job, the broken relationships, the years I've already lost. Positive self-talk is fine for people whose problems are manageable. But mine are real. And you're right. Your problems are real. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that saying nice things to yourself in the mirror will make the debt disappear or heal the diagnosis or bring back what you've lost. I am not selling you a fantasy. I am offering you something much more powerful than a fantasy. I am offering you a foundation. Because here's what I know about crisis. Here's what I know about real, devastating, life-altering difficulty. When everything is falling apart around you, and I mean everything, not the small stuff, I mean the kind of falling apart that wakes you up at 3 in the morning and makes it hard to breathe. When everything is falling apart, what determines whether you survive it is not your circumstances. Circumstances are often outside your control. What determines whether you survive it is your internal narrative. The story you tell yourself about who you are in the middle of the storm. There is a concept in psychology called self-talk. And for decades, it was kind of treated as a soft feel-good add-on to the serious work of therapy and performance coaching. But the research, and we're talking real research, rigorous peer-reviewed, longitudinal research, the research tells us that the nature of our internal dialogue has a measurable, significant, quantifiable impact on our performance, our resilience, our health, and our outcomes. Athletes who speak to themselves in the second or third person, you can do this, James, or James has prepared for this, consistently outperform athletes who use I. Why? Because it creates a tiny bit of psychological distance. It allows you to be your own coach instead of just your own inner critic. Soldiers in extreme survival situations who maintain a positive internal narrative survive at higher rates than those who succumb to catastrophic thinking, even when the external conditions are identical. Patients in medical settings who speak to themselves with compassion and encouragement recover faster and report less pain. This is not woo-woo, this is neuroscience. The brain is a pattern recognition machine, and the patterns you reinforce more strongly through repetition, through emotion, through the tone of your own voice inside your own head. Those patterns become the default operating system. And the beautiful, terrifying, empowering truth is you can choose the operating system, you can reinstall it every morning on purpose. So let me tell you what that actually looks like. Not the theory, the practice. Because I don't believe in inspiration without application. Inspiration without application is just entertainment. And you deserve more than entertainment today. You deserve transformation. The first thing you say to yourself in the morning should acknowledge that you are alive and that it matters. I know that sounds simple. I know it sounds almost embarrassingly simple. But stay with me, because there is something that happens when you look in the mirror and you say out loud, I am alive. Today is not guaranteed and I have it. I am here. I am. There is something chemical that happens. Something shifts. The brain registers presence. It pulls you out of autopilot and into the driver's seat. You stop being a passenger in your own morning and you become the navigator. And this is the part that takes courage, you speak to the truth of who you are, not who you fear you are, not who your worst moments suggest you might be, but who you actually are, at your core, in your best moments, in the moments when you've been proud of yourself. You say, I am resilient, because you are. The fact that you're here is proof of it. You say, I have survived everything the world has thrown at me so far because you have. Every single thing. 100% of your worst days you got through. You say, I am capable of more than I have shown, because you are. Every human being is. The gap between what we are and what we are capable of is one of the most vast, unexplored territories in existence. And you get to begin closing that gap today. You say, I am worthy of the life I want, because you are. Not because you've earned it, not because you're perfect, not because you've checked all the right boxes, but because you exist. Because you have a heartbeat and a mind and a soul and the capacity to grow, and that is enough to be worthy of wanting more. You say these things not as lies. You say them as truths that haven't fully arrived yet. You say them the way a farmer speaks to seeds in the ground, not because he can see the harvest, but because he knows the harvest is coming. Let me tell you about another person. I want to tell you about someone whose story I find endlessly moving. A young man I'll call Elias. Elias was 26 years old and had spent most of his adult life in a cycle of starting and stopping. He would get excited about something, a business idea, a fitness goal, a creative project. He'd go hard for 2, maybe 3 weeks, and then nothing. It would just evaporate. He'd wake up one morning and the motivation was gone, and he couldn't explain why. So he'd tell himself the same story he always told himself. I'm not the kind of person who follows through. I'm good at starting, bad at finishing. That's just who I am. Amma, I want you to notice something about that sentence. That's just who I am. Those 5 words are among the most dangerous words in the English language because they take a behavior, a pattern, and they convert it into an identity. And once something is your identity, you stop questioning it. You stop trying to change it because you can't change who you are. You can only change what you do. Except that's wrong. That's completely devastatingly wrong. You are not your patterns. You are not your past behavior. You are not the sum of your worst choices or your weakest moments. Identity is not a fixed thing. It is a story. And stories can be rewritten. Elias started doing something new. Every morning, before he did anything else, he would write down just 3 sentences, that's all. 3 sentences about who he was choosing to be that day, not who he feared he was, who he was choosing to be. I am the kind of person who does what he says he's going to do. I am the kind of person who shows up even when it's hard. I am the kind of person who keeps going. Were these things true when he first started writing them? Not completely. He still slipped. He still had days where he didn't show up. But here's what started happening. And this is the real miracle. When those days came, instead of saying, see, that's just who I am, he started saying, that's not who I am. That was a bad day. Let me try again tomorrow. The story changed. And when the story changed, the behavior changed. And when the behavior changed, the results changed. And when the results changed, the story got easier to believe. And when the story got easier to believe, the behavior came more naturally. Until one day, not overnight, but one day, Elias realized that the gap between who he was choosing to be and who he actually was had nearly closed. He built the business. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but he built it. And when people ask him how he did it, he doesn't talk about strategy or funding or timing. He says, I changed what I said to myself in the morning. Everything else followed. I want to talk for a moment about failure. Because we can't have a conversation about transformation without talking about failure. And I want to talk about it differently than you might expect. Most motivational speeches tell you to embrace failure, to not be afraid of it, to see it as feedback. And all of that is true. But I want to go deeper than that. I want to talk about the morning after failure. Because that's the real test. That's where most people quit. Not in the failure itself. People can be surprisingly brave in the moment of crisis. It's the morning after. It's waking up the next day with the failure still fresh, with the embarrassment still stinging, with the voice in your head on absolute maximum volume saying, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. What do you say to yourself on that morning? What do you say when you've just lost the job or the relationship or the deal? When you've just gotten the diagnosis you prayed you wouldn't get? When the project you poured yourself into collapsed in public, in front of people you wanted to impress? When you tried the thing and failed at the thing, and now you have to go back to your regular life and face the people who knew you tried? What do you say? I'll tell you what most people say. They say, I knew it. I knew it would go wrong. I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I wasn't good enough. I'm going to stop trying to be something I'm not. And then they stop. And the tragedy is not the failure. The tragedy is the stopping. The tragedy is what that internal voice convinces them of on the morning after. I want to tell you about a woman who changed my entire understanding of failure. I'm not going to use her real name, but her story is real. She had tried to start a business 4 times, and 4 times, for different reasons, it hadn't worked. The 4th failure was the hardest because it was the most public, the most vested, the most hopeful. She had quit her job for this one. She had used her savings. She had told everyone in her life, and it didn't work. And she had to go back, hat in hand, and rebuild from scratch. And on the morning after, the very morning after she had made the final decision to close down, she told me she did something that surprised even herself. She got up, she showered, she made coffee, she sat down at her kitchen table, and she took out a piece of paper and she wrote the following words at the top. What I know to be true about myself today. Not what went wrong, not why I failed, not a post-mortem, not a lesson list. She wrote, what I know to be true about myself today. And then she wrote, I am brave. I am brave. I tried 4 times when most people wouldn't try once. I know more than I have ever known. I am still standing. I am not done. And then she cried. And then she cried. And then she ate breakfast. And then she started over. That 5th attempt is now a thriving company with 40 employees. But here is what I want you to understand. The 5th attempt was not successful because of a better business plan. It was successful because she went into it with a different internal architecture. She went into it as a person who had decided consciously, deliberately, every single morning what the truth about her was. And nobody, not failure, not rejection, not the numbers, not other people's opinions, nobody could shake that truth unless she let them. That is what morning self-talk gives you. Not a guarantee of success, but an internal foundation that failure cannot erode. Let me talk about the stories we've inherited, because I think this is one of the most underexplored parts of this conversation. We talk a lot about mindset. We talk about habits and routines and morning rituals. But we don't talk enough about the fact that many of us aren't even running our own inner narrative. We're running someone else's. Think about the first voice that ever told you something about yourself. Think about the adults in your life when you were small. Parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, older siblings. Think about the things they said, not in big dramatic moments, but in passing. The offhand comments, the small dismissals, the comparisons. Why can't you be more like your brother? You're too sensitive. Stop dreaming and be realistic. You're not really the athletic type, are you? You've always been the difficult one. These things were said without weight, without intention to wound, but they landed in a child's brain, a brain that was still forming, still trying to understand who it was. And they stuck, they calcified into beliefs. They became the unconscious script, the tape that plays. And here is the miracle and the challenge of being human. You can inherit a story, and you can choose a different one. But you cannot choose a different one by accident. You cannot choose a different one by simply trying harder or wanting it more. You choose a different one by showing up every day, especially every morning, and deliberately, consistently, persistently speaking a different truth over your life. This is not denial. I want to be very clear about that. I am not asking you to pretend your challenges don't exist. I'm not asking you to paste a smile over your pain. I'm not asking you to toxic positive your way through genuine grief or struggle. That is not what this is. What I'm asking you to do is separate the facts from the story. The fact might be, I failed. The story is, I am a failure. I am a failure. The fact might be, I am struggling. The story is, I will always struggle. The fact might be, things are hard right now. The story is, things will always be this hard, and I am not capable of changing them. The facts are real. The story is a choice. And I genuinely deeply want you to choose a better story. Because the world needs you operating at full capacity. Not because of what you can produce or achieve or accomplish in a measurable way, but because every human being who steps into their full power, who sheds the weight of a story that was never truly theirs, who begins to live from the inside out rather than being defined by the outside in. Every person who does that sends a ripple. You know the people in your life who seem to have this quality, a kind of quiet, unshakable confidence, not arrogance, not loudness, just a steadiness, a sense that they know who they are and they're okay with it. You've met those people. And you've probably noticed something about them. When you're around them, you feel better about yourself. Their energy lifts the room without trying. They don't take up too much space, but they don't shrink either. They speak to you like you matter because they know they matter, and they extend that knowing outward. That's the ripple. That's what's available to you. And it starts every single morning in the quiet, in the private space between sleep and the world, when you choose what to say to yourself. I want to talk about consistency, because this is where most people lose. Not in the first day, not in the first week. They're still excited then, still fired up from the speech or the book or the moment of clarity. They lose in week 3, week 4, week 4. The day drained and the commute was terrible and the boss was awful and the bank account was low and the body was tired and they forgot to do the thing. And then they missed a day and then they missed another day. And then they started to feel like a failure for not doing the thing that was supposed to make them feel like less of a failure. Sound familiar? Here's what I want you to know about consistency. Consistency is not a streak. Consistency is not perfection. Consistency is a direction. It's a compass heading, not a scoreboard. Every single morning you do this thing, even imperfectly, even when your voice shakes, even when half of you doesn't believe the words you're saying, every morning you show up and speak truth over your own life, you are reinforcing a direction. You are saying to your brain, to your nervous system, to the universe, to whoever or whatever is listening, this is who I am choosing to be. This is the direction I am pointed. And sometimes you'll miss a day. And that is fine. You don't start over from zero, you don't lose the progress. You just pick up the compass and orient again. The direction matters infinitely more than the streak. There's a woman I want to tell you about who understood this in the most beautiful way. Her name was Eleanor, and she was not a public figure, not an entrepreneur, not someone who built a famous company or won an award. She was a school teacher for 31 years. She spent a career in a school where most of the kids came from difficult homes. Poverty, instability, absence of consistent love. The kind of school where the teachers burned out every 3 to 5 years because it was so relentless and the resources were so thin. Eleanor stayed for 31 years. And she was, by every account of everyone who knew her and every child who passed through her classroom, extraordinary. Someone once asked her, a young teacher who was already starting to feel the weight of the job, they asked her, how do you sustain it? How do you keep giving when so much is taken? How do you come in every morning, year after year, and still care? And Eleanor said, I'm told, she said it without hesitation, like she'd always known the answer. Every morning before I leave the house, I stand in my kitchen and I say three things to myself. I say, I am enough for today. I have something to give. Someone today needs exactly what I have to offer. And then I go. Some mornings I believe it more than others, but I always say it. And I always go. I am enough for today. I have something to give. Someone needs exactly what I have to offer. 31 years, hundreds of children. An entire career sustained not by a system, not by recognition, not by a salary that reflected her worth, but by three sentences. Three sentences every morning that reminded her of who she was and why she was there. That's why she was there. I want to talk about the gap between who you are and who you want to be, because I think it's misunderstood. Most people experience this gap as evidence of their inadequacy. They look at where they want to be and then look at where they are. And the distance between those 2 points feels like proof that they're not enough, proof that they're behind, proof that they don't have what it takes. But what if the gap isn't evidence of your failure? What if the gap is evidence of your vision? What if only people with something genuinely inside them, a real fire, a real calling, a real sense of something more? What if those are the only people who can even perceive the gap? What if people who have given up can't even see it anymore? The gap is not your enemy. The gap is your invitation. Every single morning, when you wake up and feel the distance between where you are and where you want to be, that feeling is not despair. That feeling, if you name it right, is hunger. And hunger is fuel. But you have to name it right. This is everything. Because the same gap, the same internal sense of distance can be narrated two completely different ways. You can wake up and say, I'm so far behind. I've wasted so much time. I'll never get there. What's the point? Or you can wake up and say, I know exactly what I want. I know the direction I need to move. Every day I take one step. I get closer. I'm in motion. Same gap and same distance. Completely different relationship to it. Completely different outcome. The morning conversation is where you narrate the gap. It is where you decide whether that gap is a verdict or a direction. I want to get very specific now about what this can look like. Not one size fits all. Not a script I'm handing you and saying, repeat this forever. Your morning conversation needs to be yours. It needs to be true to your life, your history, your values, your specific version of the larger human story. But let me give you some building blocks. Some truths that I believe are universal. Truths you can speak over your life regardless of who you are or where you come from. You can say, I have survived 100% of my hardest days. Everyone, I am still here. You can say, I am not the sum of my worst moments. I am the sum of how I responded to them. You can say, I don't need to be perfect. I need to be present and persistent. You can say, I am allowed to want more. Wanting more is not greed, it is growth. You can say, the people who wrote the story about who I am, they were doing the best they could. But I get to write the next chapter. You can say, today I will act like the person I am becoming. You can say, I am not starting over. I am starting from experience. You can say, everything I have been through has been preparing me, not punishing me, preparing me. You can say, I am not too late. The right time to begin has always been now. You can say, I deserve the life I am working toward. Not because I've earned it yet, because I exist and I'm trying, and that is enough. These are not affirmations in the shallow, meaningless sense. These are recalibrations. These are truth statements delivered with intention to a brain that has been running a different program for too long, and they work. Not magic wand work, but deep structural foundational work. The kind that shows up months later when you notice you didn't back down from a hard conversation. When you notice you went back to the gym after 3 days off without beating yourself up about it. When you notice you took the leap, the small one, the first one, and it felt natural. Like it was always who you were. Let me tell you one more story. And this one is close to me. This one is about someone I know very, very well. This person grew up with everything they needed and still felt somehow like nothing was enough. They had education and opportunity and people who loved them. And yet there was always this undercurrent, this low-level frequency of not enough. Not smart enough, not focused enough, not successful enough, not far enough along. They built a life that looked from the outside like it was going well, and from the inside felt like standing on ice. Solid enough if you didn't look down, terrifying if you did. And then something happened, a period of real difficulty. Real love. The kind that doesn't announce itself and doesn't ask your permission. And this person I know, had to make a choice. Not a dramatic, cinematic choice. A quiet, daily, unglamorous choice. To either let the inner critic have complete control or to fight back. Not loudly, just consistently, every morning. And they chose to fight back. They started small, embarrassingly small. Some mornings it was literally just 3 words, said in a whisper, looking at a tired face in a bathroom mirror. I'm still here. And on the days when even that felt like too much, they just stand there for a moment and breathe. And acknowledge that breathing was enough. That being present was enough. That showing up for another morning was in itself an act of courage. And slowly, unspectacularly, one quiet morning at a time, the flow got steadier. The eyes got thicker. The inner critic got quieter, not because it was defeated dramatically, but because it was being consistently, lovingly, persistently answered. And the life that person built on the other side of that period is not perfect, not loud, not legendary by any external measurement. But it is genuinely, deeply theirs. It is lived from the inside out. It is a life where morning feels like the beginning of something instead of the continuation of a burden. And if you're wondering whether that person is me, you're right. It is. And I'm not standing here because I have all the answers. I'm standing here because I have lived this. I have been in the dark room and found the light switch. I have been on the floor and gotten back up. And what got me up, every time, without exception, was the choice to speak a different truth over my own life. That is what I want for you. Not my truth, yours, spoken in your voice. In the quiet of your morning, before the world gets its hands on your day, I want to talk for a moment about the people around you. Because what happens when you start doing this, when you genuinely start shifting the way you speak to yourself, when you start showing up differently, moving differently, occupying your life differently, not everyone is going to celebrate it. I want to prepare you for that because it catches people off guard and it shouldn't. When you start changing, some people in your life will feel threatened. Not because they want you to fail, often they love you genuinely, but because your growth is a mirror. When you start speaking kindly to yourself and showing up in your full power, the people who have not yet done that work will feel it as a kind of silent accusation, as if your rising is a commentary on their stillness. It's not, but that's how it can feel to them. Some of them will say things like, "You've changed," and they'll say it as if it's a warning, as if changing is a bad thing, as if the version of you that was smaller and quieter and more easily managed was the right version. Don't let that land in a way that pulls you back. Change is not betrayal. Growth is not abandonment. And for the people who genuinely love you, the ones who are not threatened but are maybe confused by your new energy, your new confidence, your new morning routines, be patient with them. Be gentle with them. Be gentle with them. Not every person is going to be on the same schedule of awakening. Your job is not to drag them. Your job is to be so clearly, unmistakably better. Not better than them, better than you were, that they become curious. That your life becomes the invitation, because it will. People who are genuinely transforming don't need to preach it. They wear it. You can feel it when you're near them. And the people who are ready, the ones whose own quiet voice is starting to ask, could I do this too? They will come to you. They will come to you. They will watch you and take notes. And you will become part of their story of transformation without even trying. That is the ultimate ripple. That is the long game. Now I want to talk about the moment, the very first moment. Because everything we've discussed, all the stories, all the science, all the strategy, it leads to one moment. Tomorrow morning, just tomorrow morning, not the rest of your life. Not a commitment to perfection. Not a promise you'll never break. Just tomorrow morning. When your alarm goes off, or when you wake up naturally, however you wake, and in that first moment before consciousness fully arrives, before the to-do list and the worries and the weight of everything comes rushing in that liminal, tender, luminous moment, I want you to choose. Choose to be there for yourself. Choose before anyone else gets a word in to be the voice that says, you are loved, you are capable, you are still in this, you have everything you need to take the next step. Today is not finished before it started. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to begin. Say it in your own words. Say it the way you'd say it to the person you love most in the world. Say it with the gentleness you would offer a child who was scared in the dark. Say it with the conviction you would use to defend someone you believed in absolutely. Say it to yourself because you deserve it, not as a reward for having done enough, achieved enough, suffered enough, proved enough. You deserve it because you are here. Because you have a heartbeat and a history and a future that hasn't been written yet. Because every single morning you wake up, the universe is handing you a blank page. And you with all your complexity and all your contradictions and all your beautiful, unfinished, magnificent humanness, you are the author. So write something worth reading, not for anyone else, for you, for the person you are becoming. For the child you were who deserved better than what they got, and the adult you are who is brave enough to give it to yourself now. Write something worth reading. And if the writing is hard some mornings, and it will absolutely be. If some mornings the blank page feels like an accusation instead of an invitation, remember this. Even on those mornings, even on the mornings when the best you can offer is a whisper, a single sentence, 3 words, even just a breath, even then you are still the author. You are still showing up. You are still there. And showing up, friends, showing up for yourself every single morning in the privacy of your own unshared mind. That is not a small thing. That is not a basic thing. That is the most important, most radical, most transformative thing any human being can do. It is the work. It is the real work. And it is yours to do. I want to end with this. There is a version of you. I know this with every part of me. There is a version of you that you have caught glimpses of. Not often, but sometimes. In moments of unexpected courage. In moments when you surprised yourself. In moments when you were so present, so alive, so unmistakably yourself, that the world seemed to pause and take notice. You've had those moments, even if they were brief. Even if they were a long time ago. Even if they were quiet and unwitnessed. You have been that person, even once. Even for a moment. That person is not a fantasy. That person is not a fluke. That person is not someone you accidentally stumbled into being. That person is who you actually are when the weight of a wrong story falls away. That person is what's underneath all the doubt and the fear and the inherited narrative and the accumulated years of speaking to yourself as if you didn't matter. That person is waiting for you every morning at the threshold of a new day. And all you have to do, the only thing, the first thing, the most important thing, is wake up and say their name. Say your own name. With respect. With the unshakable certainty of someone who has decided. Decided, not discovered, not earned, decided. That they are worth the life they are building. Say to yourself every morning what you would say to the person you love most. You are enough. You are brave. You have survived everything this far. You are still growing. You are still becoming. The best version of you is not behind you. It is ahead of you, walking toward you from the future. And every morning you take a step in that direction. You are not finished. You are not too late. You are not too broken, too old, too scared, too behind, too ordinary, too anything. You are human. And that means you are infinitely capable of change. Say it every morning. Not because the world tells you to. Not because a speech told you to. But because you choose to. Because on some deep, quiet, unshakable level, you know it's true. Say it until you believe it. Say it when you already believe it. Say it on the hard days most of all. Say it so many times in so many mornings that it becomes the first language of your soul. This is how lives change. Not in the grand gestures, not in the dramatic moments, in the mornings, in the quiet, in the space between sleeping and living, where you get to choose who walks out that door. Choose the version of you that is done being quiet, done playing small, done accepting a story that was never really yours. Choose the version of you that looks in the mirror and sees not a list of failures or a catalog of fears, but a human being with everything it takes to live a life that is genuinely, fully, magnificently theirs. Choose that person. Say that person's words every morning because you are worth. Because the world needs you at full power. Because somewhere in a town or a city or a small quiet house, there is someone who is going to need the ripple of what you become when you decide to believe in yourself. They need you to be whole. They need you to be brave. They need you to show them just by living your life fully that it's possible. For them, for yourself, for the child you were who needed someone to say it, for the person you are becoming who deserves to hear it. Say it every morning. Thank you.